Cool. Yeah, there's some stuff I want to talk to him about, ask him some questions, some pointed things.
Awesome. I was digging into a little bit of Daniel's content as well. Listened to his interview with Stacey and just a few other things. Really like what he talks about, how he thinks. I'm excited to bring him on the show. I think it's going to be one of those you don't expect it, but get the extra value of having that insight. That's that special person. So I'm excited to have Daniel on here.
I don't think behavioral anything gets old.
Yeah, because it's ever changing too. It's almost like marketing. It's like, how is it right now? How are people thinking? How are people feeling? I think
it points out
humans, but yeah.
Yeah, it calls out a lot of the things that we all think and feel and need to hear and be reassured about. So I don't think the behavioral and the psychology side of just being a human ever gets old.
Absolutely. Just giving everybody a few seconds to get here. And yes, let's see, giving everybody a few seconds to get here, and then we'll get started as always. So hello, anyone, if you're already here, let us know in the chat. Looks like we got
see if Sid's here. If he's not, Sid, I just got your message. That means a lot. Thank you. That was a nice message.
Expect Stacey should be here. I tagged her. Expect her to cancel her morning and be an avid viewer. Okay. You want to go ahead and get started? Let's do it.
Yeah. So
looking forward to this. Jeffrey, what's up, man? How are you? Hey, Cody, how's it going?
What's up?
Thanks for being here, guys. All right, where are we? Today, we're going to be talking about Daniel. We're going to be talking to Daniel Crosby about behavioral finance. Really excited to dig into this. I know, Corey, you have some pointed questions, but I think as advisors, the greatest value we can add to people is the mindset that comes along with investing. And obviously we have to touch on risk tolerance. And this is really about getting to know people. Plans, investments are all commoditized these days. And I think that our connection to people and understanding people is what brings out the value as an advisor. So I'm extra excited to bring on Daniel and get his expertise around that. So without further ado, let's get started with the show. So many great guests. We're gonna have to edit that every quarter or every 6 months or so. That show's got to get edited. Again, thanks guys for being here. Hey, William, how's it going? Justin, got a few of the regulars in here. I know, and I see at least 15 people in the background. Awesome.
Yeah, so, Sid, I don't know if you jumped on early enough. I just wanted to say I appreciate your message. I got your message, and that means the world to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sid. Whatever you said, I appreciate it.
Was just saying, I appreciate all the value you guys put out. I consistently look at it and use it as a resource. So just a nice message.
That's what it's here for. It's here for you guys. So today, obviously, we were mentioning we have on Daniel Crosby, and we're going to be talking about behavioral finance. So without me blurting out too much information, I think it would make much more sense to bring on Daniel, talk about who he is, what he focuses on, and then, easily get into the meat of the conversation from there. So without further ado, Daniel Crosby.
Guys, good morning. I was still bobbing my head to your intro music. You caught me unaware. It's good to see you.
Yeah. That was actually from one of our members, which was cool, who does a little bit of engineering in the background, little audio engineering. So he gave us the beat for that. Very meta, but nice to add it to the show. So if you appreciate that, we'll thank Zach. Appreciate it, Zach. Thanks for being here, Daniel. I know you've probably done 1,000 of these things. We'll give somebody some context. Obviously, we're getting into behavioral finance, but for now, why don't you introduce yourself, where you work, and a little bit of what you do.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Dr. Daniel Crosby. I'm the Chief Behavioral Officer at Orion Advisor Solutions. I am a clinical psychologist by education, but have spent my whole career in the world of financial services. And so really I have a 3-part mandate at Orion. It's all about training, tools, and technology. So I'm a big part of the training arm of Orion, helping advisors, get the education they need to be behaviorally informed advisors. And then we're building tools, assessments, and different things for advisors to use with their clients. And then finally, baking behavior into the way that we create fintech so that people are induced to make the best decisions possible. So that's me.
Awesome. How long did you say you've been working in the finance, area?
12 years. I'm just do a little math, but yeah, 12.
That's
12
amazing.
Years.
From focusing on psychology, what took you to that area? Obviously, I feel like it fits like a puzzle piece, but what drove you there personally?
Yeah, so I'm actually the son of a financial advisor. My dad, was and still is an active financial advisor. And so I got into psychology. I got into psychology for a very specific reason. I wanted to help a dear friend who had an eating disorder of all things. In my efforts to help her, I got immersed in psychology, absolutely fell in love with it, decided to pursue graduate education in it. But then about 3 years into my Ph.D. program, I was just burned out. I'd met with thousands of clients at this point, but I'm soft. Like I was taking the work home with me. I was too empathetic, if you will, or had poor boundaries, I guess is another way to put it. And I was taking my work home with me. It was stressing me out. I didn't know if the clients that I saw on Friday would be there on Monday, and it was just too much for me. And so I said, look, I want to work in the field. Like I love thinking deeply about why people do the things that they do, but I need to do it in a non-clinical setting. And so long story short, my dad, who's a great friend and career coach, was like, look, there's a ton of psychology in my work. And I was like, what are you talking about? At the time, because at this time I'm 25 years old, halfway through my PhD program. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're a numbers guy, and he's like, no. And so then, long story short, I went and did a postdoc here in Atlanta at Emory University, which is a great business school, to try and get some exposure to the business side of psychology, discovered behavioral economics in that, and then knew I was off to the races, knew I was going to be the person who was going to translate the findings of academia into a packageable way where people like my dad in flyover country, right? Like, so advisors, everyday advisors who are not reading, the Journal of Behavioral Finance, what can they do with these things and how can they apply them to their practice? So that's sort of the expedited story.
Hey, Daniel, real quick, like over the last 12 years, you've been in this and deep into it. And I said, as we just were coming on with Ryan, like this stuff never gets old for me.
Yeah.
How underserved is the market from your perspective in the coaching and learnings of psychology and behavioral finance? Like how much more do we have to go to really break through?
Yeah. So I think there's 3 things that I think we need. I call it my 3 E's. If we as a profession are really going to change human behavior, we need the right education, we need the right environment, and we need the right encouragement. So education, we've made some strides. Like advisors, every advisor knows what behavioral finance is. I think many or maybe even most advisors have at least a cursory understanding of some of the basic tenets of behavioral finance and are trying to distill those down to their clients. So we're making progress there. There's a ways to go yet. There's still people who haven't read my books, which is a travesty, which is just a crying shame. But I think, the next 2 pieces we're very underserved. And it's like, how do we take the insights of behavioral finance and bake that into the environment, which is the portfolio, as it were, and how do we provide the right kind of coaching or encouragement, right? That real time, just in time encouragement where the advisor is the last line of defense between a client and a catastrophic decision. we need to train advisors to be persuasive and influential and empathetic and all these things. And I don't think we've done much as an industry. So I think the desire's there. Like that's the good news. Like, just like you, the advisors that I talk to, this is their favorite part of the business. Like, this is the most interesting stuff. This is really where the research suggests that advisors add value in a way that tech will never commoditize. Mm-hmm. And so we have a good start, but there's still work to do.
I love it. And I would think, like, when I think about you saying advisors want to learn about this, I think about all the terrible sales programs out there that are teaching power language and closing statements and focusing on how to ask for referrals at the end of meetings, instead of taking all of that and packaging it into some course towards behavioral finance and empathy, and teaching people how to think. Because once you can think for yourself, once you learn, I feel like, how to fish in terms of how people feel, if that's even a teachable thing, then, which you would have to let me know. But it's just seeing how people feel, your business changes in all different facets, because once you start focusing on the other person, everything you do day in and day out changes. And I think your business starts growing faster because you're always thinking about the other person.
Real quick, Daniel, I just want to pause. Guys, keep getting your questions in. Jeff, I see your question, and we'll get the link for Daniel's book and stuff. Get the questions in and we'll ask them.
How many books, Daniel? I was on your site. I saw two, I thought, from you up front, but I'm sure there was a bunch of books on there. I didn't know if you were a part of all of them.
There's a couple that I've written a handful. The two best ones are The Laws of Wealth and The Behavioral Investor. Like,
okay, the ones at the top of your website.
Yeah, like if you read those two, you'd be well served.
Okay, I'll link those two, or link you guys to Daniel's website, so you guys can go there and check out all the books if you'd like. But those two, the first two you see, will be.
Yeah, right. Do you mind circling back on your point that you were making there?
Yeah. So I don't even remember what I was saying. What was my point?
It was brilliant.
Thank you. Thinking about, I was saying that in the way you said, advisors, like, they want to learn how people feel and what they're really thinking, because then they know how to act. I find most advisors don't know what to do or possibly say, or maybe they don't enter that area, and they keep it to the numbers because they don't want to fumble around and either offend somebody or be wrong, and I don't know if that empathy side is more intuition, or how you would teach it. But I guess that was my point, is I think that's the business changing factor that we're all missing, is that behavioral finance piece.
Yeah. So, you talked about some of these high pressure sales tactics that I think a lot of, I won't pick on, I was about to pick on specific folks, but these right. We're going to not do that today. We're going to not get in trouble with compliance today. But, these high pressure sales tactics that folks learn, it's really like programmed inauthenticity. Like, when you see someone coming at you with one of these sales pitches, like, you can smell it from 100 miles away. And people have such a sixth sense for BS and authenticity. And when people can tell that you care, like, the world is yours. And what we're doing instead is giving advisors scripts, right, to milk people out of their money, when instead what we need to be doing is teaching them about reflective listening, teaching them about empathy, teaching them about deep discovery and asking great questions and really understanding their clients, instead of giving them some sort of boiler room holdover sales tactics. So, I think that's where we're headed. And the tricky thing, Corey's talked about why he loves behavioral finance, and you, Ryan, talked about because it's ever changing. That's the thing. The best we can do with human behavior is really give kind of an intellectual scaffolding, right? You can know high level truths about people, and you can have sort of a mental lattice work that you're operating from. But every client that walks through your door is going to be different than the one that was in your office the previous hour. And you need things that are sort of intangible, like curiosity and empathy and kindness. And nobody's learning that in their sales training.
When you say learning, like, I want to dig in, like, what's your perspective on the appetite for advisors to want to learn that versus, because Ryan and I see it, we talk to a lot of advisors, as do you, Daniel, but like, there's also human behavior of like, that's hard to do, to learn some of that stuff and apply some of that human behavior on an unscalable basis to your business versus taking the script or taking the stuff off the shelf and using that, which allows you to scale your message, but it neutralizes and sterilizes the message as well.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So I think the appetite is there, and I think candidly the appetite would be even greater if people understood how impactful it was. Like if people understood that this is the nucleus of every single thing you're doing and didn't view it as some sort of peripheral soft skill that's like a nice to have. Like, no, it may not scale in the way that technology scales or a script scales, but it can produce businesses of scale and businesses that are self-perpetuating. Because if you get on the right track with this stuff, it's so addictive. And the other thing is it can change your life. This is one of my biggest gripes about behavioral finance is a lot of times we take this on as like, well, here I come, the white knight, and I'm going to learn these things about my screwed up, flawed clients, and then I'm going to save them from themselves, right? Well, that's part of it. But like, heal yourself. Like the things that you learn when you're studying psychology and you're studying behavioral finance, we're all a little broken, and they can help us too be better partners and parents and business owners and everything. So I think when you approach behavioral finance from the perspective that it can help you a whole lot, as well as helping your clients and help your business, I think the appetite's absolutely there.
I would even argue that this needs to start coming into maybe if not the 7, something about the CFP a little bit more or something. I don't know how you would, I guess, ingrain more behavior in it, but the training or the level that you need to study, I guess, to get there. I just feel like everybody's got their face in a book for so long that by the time you get to people, you kind of understand a little bit of the rules, but you don't understand people. And then you need to develop that experience. So you're starting so far behind with a bunch of knowledge, but you can't apply it to somebody because you don't know how they feel.
The CFP just announced that they just upped the requirement for a behavioral finance psychology piece in the CFP. It's now 7% of the designation. I mean, I think it should be like 50% of the designation. But I mean,
I think I saw that on your post actually when I was scrolling through. You just mentioned that recently over the last 2 weeks or so, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Corey, why don't you get into some of your granular questions before I have a few of mine where I would steer this, but maybe we'll overlap. So why don't you get into yours first?
There's just one that, like I mentioned to you backstage, Daniel, that you had this conversation with Trey Williams recently, and it was fascinating because it speaks to what Ryan and I are doing, entrepreneurship, and it speaks to the business and FAs. FAs are all entrepreneurs, right? So I really took a lot from that conversation. But one thing that stood out was the word unlearn. And you guys talked in depth about unlearning behavior to unlock future growth and future more positive behaviors. And I wonder, like, as the human attention graph shifts, as the things that we're more interested as humans, especially COVID has fast forwarded this thing like exponentially, which I'm sure you have some thoughts on, but we want to consume things in a different manner. We want to do things in a different manner. We want to make connections differently. How do advisors unlearn some of the behaviors they have been taught, we've all been taught over the last 15 or 20 years out of the jump? Like what are some steps that we can take? Because let me put something even more granular on it. Well, when seminars return, my business will be back to where it was in 2019. Maybe. We don't know, but so how do we unlearn some of that stuff?
Yeah. So, the way that I think about it, which I mean, this, I said on the podcast, I want to write a book about this one day because I'm so fascinated by it. And I haven't written the book yet. So I don't claim to be
unlearning. I made a note of it.
Right. I don't claim to be an expert yet, but I think about it the same way that, in sort of the same way of this Cartesian principle of I think, therefore I am, right? He took everything he thought he knew and he deconstructed it until he could find the one thing that he knew to be, indubitably true. And I think that's what we have to do with our experience and some of the business lessons we've learned. Wall Street and the finance business is like terrible for these kind of like folksy aphorisms and this little like down home humor and things, these little mantras that we have that I'm not even sure if they work. And so I think what we have to do is start to question everything and ask ourselves, how is that working for me? How is that working for me, both from a business perspective and for me as a human being who's trying to grow and be better day after day? So I think we have to question everything. And if you find yourself starting to get defensive about questioning something, or you find yourself being reluctant to question something, that's probably a good indicator that you've poked a sore spot and that it needs double the amount of questioning. So I really think it takes making a list of everything you do in a given day and breaking it down and deconstructing it and say, how is it working for me? Another very simple thing that I do is I try and, I do this sort of compare and contrast thing. If you ask me like, what are my values, right? I would say, things like, being a great husband and father, right? Like being someone who's always learning, all these things. And work, candidly, would kind of be down the list. Like being, my job would be kind of lower on the list than some of the personal stuff. But if you look at how I spend my time, like there's a massive imbalance. Like I don't spend a whole lot of, I spend a lot more time working than I do being a great husband and father. And so I think we have to not buy our own nonsense sometimes. We have to look for discrepancies in our own lives and not buy into this bill of goods that we're selling ourselves all the time. We all have this drive to think of ourselves as above average, with respect to our talent and our intellect and all these things, and also above average with respect to our morality or goodness. And neither of those things is necessarily true. And until we sort of do the self-examination to determine how we can get better in both respects, nothing happens. So I think you have to sort of boldly break apart your life, question your own nonsense, and look for the discrepancies between who you say you are and who your time says you are.
Oh man, I love that, especially at the end. I feel like that was real, like cherry on the sundae comment, and then again makes me think. I think one of the things we do, especially when we're planning or meeting with advisors, is starting to say, like, oh, I don't have, how much time do you have to market? What are you going to allocate? And what are you spending your time on now? And it took us a while to realize, I think, to get to that point, but we had to say, like, where are your goals, and what are you doing every day that we think is going to get you there? And do you need like a complete switch of activity of what you should be doing? I find a lot of people are doing that, and that's a hard thing to do. I like your idea of the exercise too. Everybody taking out whatever, pen, paper, and just writing down everything you do all day, what you focus on for blocks of time. How often do you do that for yourself as an audit? If yearly or how often at all?
Oh, me personally? No, I'm full of crap. I do it rarely. Like I said, don't listen to me. I've done it a couple of times, not a lot though.
Do as I say, not as I do.
No, for sure. That's a shrink's
Don't watch
operation.
me. Just read my books.
Right,
Daniel
yeah.
Crosby. Put a stamp on it.
That's my whole gig. Yeah.
Let me throw in one question that I really like. It's a little bit specific, and it's from, sounds like you know pretty well, Jeffrey Johnson. So yeah. I'll read his specific question. In the behavioral investor, you speak of risk tolerance and risk perception. Can you explain the difference? And also, if you can touch on investor questionnaires.
Yeah, Jeffrey did not know he was doing this, but he's teeing me up for something that we're building at Orion that'll be launched soon. So really, there's this huge disconnect in the world of RTQs, right? Risk tolerance questionnaires, and the way that advisors use them. And there's a disconnect between how advisors think about risk and how academia thinks about risk. So if you ask the average advisor, does your client's risk tolerance change? Like, did your client's risk tolerance change in March of 2020? Every advisor will say to you, yes, definitely. And if you ask an academic, did their risk tolerance change? They would go, no, it did not. Because the thing that academia does is it breaks up risk into 3 categories. So you've got risk capacity, which is someone's ability to take risk based on their sort of level of financial acumen, based on how much money they have and how young or old they are. So like all else being equal, if you have more time, more money, more know-how, you have greater capacity, right? You have risk tolerance, which in the literature is your long-term attitudes towards risk-reward trade-offs, right? So this is your sort of long-term, unchanging, in a cold emotional state, your ability to make risk-reward trade-offs or your desire to make risk-reward trade-offs. And then you have risk perception or risk composure, which is this third piece, and that's the psychology piece. That's your tendency to become short-term in the face of market volatility. And so there's this miscommunication between the advisory profession and the people who study risk kind of for a living. And so what we need is an assessment that takes all 3 of these things into account, right? That takes into account, what is someone's long-term attitudes? What is their ability to take risk? But also, candidly, what is their anxiety level and how easily are they bucked off the ride? Because, if you ask one of these clients who's freaking out in March of 2020, you go, hey, should you be doing this? Like, is this the right thing to do? I think almost to a person, they would go, no, that's the risk tolerance. No, I probably shouldn't be doing this, but do it. Like, and that's the risk composure. So until we start measuring risk composure as part of our questioning process, we're not able to provide behavioral coaching in the manner we should. We're not aware of which of our clients, are most in need of a helping hand when markets get choppy. But luckily, that's something we're going to start doing, and I'm super excited about it.
That's awesome.
I loved seeing your share this morning about the flows over the last 12 months. I mean, and you said I think your comment was never fails.
Never.
Can you give us 2 examples of questions that you would use that add to unlocking somebody's composure?
Oh gosh, I'll have to pull it. So they would be things like, I'm easily stressed out, or I tend to expect the worst. I'm kind of spitballing here, but they would be they would be directionally things like that. And it's not about money, right? It's not questions about money. It's questions about, people's predispositions towards being anxious. That's
besides reading your books, where do you think somebody starts to educate themselves on that third important piece of composure?
Oh, let's see. Who's written about this? Oh, easy. Michael Kitces. Michael Kitces has written great stuff about this. He has a great piece on it that's called "The Sorry State of Risk Tolerance Questionnaires" or something like that. Yeah, Michael Kitces has written 2 or 3 great articles on this.
We got a random one coming in from Eric. Eric, we know that your daughter is joining your business, so I don't know. What are your thoughts here, Daniel, on what would you suggest for an advisor who's starting in the business with no experience? And we know that there's other advisors that you're bringing on some of your adult age children now to help you guys.
Yeah, Eric, great question. So, I mean, again, I have a hammer, so I see nails everywhere. But I would suggest that she get training in persuasion. So I see persuasion and influence as sort of the advisor's meta skill, right? Because think about what an advisor does in her day, right? An advisor is going to want to develop new business. And developing new business is all about persuading someone to part with their hard-earned dough in exchange for your goods and services. An advisor is going to want to manage her staff, right? What is that? What is leadership but persuading people to pull in service of a common goal? Your daughter is eventually going to be holding clients' hands while they face moments like we faced, this time last year. And like, what is good behavioral coaching? But persuading people to set aside that short-term fear in service of long-term benefit. So if I just had one skill to teach a new advisor, it would be influence. And a gentleman by the name of Robert Cialdini has written a book called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, which is killer. It's a like top 10 business book ever. And I would give it to her for a gift.
I love that you went there. I was expecting to go somewhere else. Go ahead, jump in, Corey.
No, so a lot of I want to continue to add value to the conversation, and I know advisors who face this, right? A lot of advisors, or there are many advisors out there that hit this plateau. They've built a business, they've maybe inherited a business, and it's been able to sustain the lifestyle they want. But the growth has slowed, and they're reaching a point, 40, 45, 50 years old. They've dreamt of this business being greater than it is, and it's just been stagnant, and they've been unable to unlock the next level. And I think one of the things that you've talked about in the past is, and again, I'm hearkening back to this conversation you had with Trey, but it's this belief that you start to lose belief that the business can be to where you want it to be. And do you have any coaching around that, and how advisors can not look at it as if they've failed, but look at it as if we just need to regain that belief, reignite that fire? And what do I need to start doing to put the pieces in place, one foot in front of the other, to now step above the plateau and take that next step?
Yeah. So again, I may be projecting here, growing up the son of an advisor, I may be projecting. So, your mileage may vary. This is what I've observed with my dad, right? When my dad got his job that he still has on the day I was born, right? So my early years were all about him hustling and grinding and trying to eke out an existence, because the truth about financial advisors is, it's very hard at first, and the attrition rates are incredible. What is the failure rates? Like 80% or something. So early on, your why is just hunger, survival, not wanting to be a statistic. And then at some point, even a middling financial advisor gets paid many times what the rest of the world gets paid, right? Even a sort of a 50th percentile level AUM advisor is making a really fantastic living. So it can be easy to forget that why. And the why is not survival anymore, right? The why is not, keeping, shoes on your kids' feet or whatever. So I think you have to pivot and find a new why, because I think, we'll go back to Nietzsche, right? He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. Like, all the tough parts of business can be overcome if the thing you're working for is something that you're intensely desirous of. And I think at some point, for a lot of advisors, money fails to motivate. So you have to, you've got money, you're making good money, and making another 100,000, 200,000, whatever it is, it doesn't really get you out of bed in the morning. So I would say that the key to breaking that stagnation is really having a why that matters on a deep personal level, something that you're not afraid to get out of bed, again, with that same tenacity that you started your business with when it was probably all about survival. And so it may be leaving a legacy. It may be leaving an intellectual legacy and helping educate the next generation of investors. Like it may be setting your daughter up to take over. Whatever it is, though, I think until you've got that North Star, like nothing else matters. And I think many advisors are so well taken care of financially that it just doesn't, money ceases to be the thing. So I think you got to look for something more engaging than just making a couple more bucks.
Yeah. And I notice when people are usually starting, I feel like it is for the money, or at least, the lifestyle. I guess it depends what kind of practice you want, because I realize there's many different advisors of, do you want to have a decent practice and have a full life, or do you want that 1B? Do you want to go to the 1 billion goal type deal? And I notice it seems to be one or the other. But one of the things like I reflect on and take from you speaking is asking yourself what you do throughout the day, and do we need those necessary goals? I wonder why people get into the business for money in the first place. What would you say about creating long-term versus short-term goals to kind of keep your mind right during those difficult times?
Well, I think you need both, right? You need kind of like this big audacious goal out there that's kind of the rocket fuel. That's the goal that you're almost like never going to meet. Like I want to leave a great legacy. There's never like a tick box where you're like, boom, did it, right? Like I want to be growing every day. So I think you need like sort of a more philosophical, more ethical, more personal goal. That's sort of the large goal. That's the rocket fuel for your endeavor. And then I think you need to be very meticulous about shorter term goals that are very measurable, right? You need to take that sort of overarching goal that's going to be a little more meta and then break it down into the constituent parts of every day. Like, okay, so if this is the big goal, what does that look like Monday through Friday? And here's just like, the stuff I'm going to cross off my list, the numbers I need to hit. So I think you need both. You need the rocket fuel and you need the stuff to just kind of get you through the short term.
Go ahead, Corey.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking tactically, any overarching themes that are common that you see, Daniel, that you would leave, our audience with, that after they jump off of this stream, that they could start thinking about today. I know it's Friday, but they can, mull it over the weekend and start putting into place and just make it a constant.
And how would you implement your composure into the financial planning process? Like the things that you're saying and the questions you have.
Yeah. So Corey, are you asking about what kind of goal? Are there any commonalities between these kind of rocket fuel goals? Is that what you're talking about?
No, like this was a great conversation. I appreciate the 35 minutes. It's very high level. Is there anything tactical that you see that's common that you could just say, guys, if I could leave you with 3 things, if I could leave you with one thing, start thinking about this every day, like make this a constant.
Oh yeah. Okay. So tactically, what can folks do? So I think one of the things that we can do, honestly, is to do a much better job of recentering our clients on their meaning. We just talked about advisor meaning. One of the things that we found in our research is at the Center for Outcomes, which is sort of the advisor education arm of Orion. One of the things we found is that conversations that begin and end with purpose, with meaning, are 50% more likely to get followed through on. So I think tactically, just beginning and ending every conversation with, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is why we're here. I'm going to recenter you on your goals. And at the end of that conversation, yes, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing XYZ. This is all in service of your dream, which is ABC. So we need to, there's something in psychology called primacy and recency effect, where we have better memory for the first part of an interaction and the last part of an interaction. And so we need to bookend every conversation we have with our clients with meaning. I think that's something very practical that advisors can start to do that will see behavioral compliance tick up a great deal. In terms of measuring composure, you should work with Orion and get my RTQ. That's the answer. No, I mean, I hope other folks will start to do this too, though, to measure psychology, right? How likely is that short-term psychology going to, bump you from that long-term focus? It needs to be a part of every risk tolerance questionnaire.
One of the things that I think we have trouble with is explaining why something is so important until there is a result to it. For example, we talk about marketing, and there's like, obviously we can track things in the middle, but it's like until you have the new relationships and new households, it feels like, and grow. What is a brand? There are all these words that we use, but what does it lead to? And with you and focusing on, I feel like that's what you're focusing on, the things that are very difficult to quantify, the things you can't feel or grab, but are the basis of every conversation. How do you get people to make that jump to start focusing on those areas that aren't as trackable or as tangible?
Yeah, it's a great question, and everyone's always looking for the magic pill, right? So I'm a psychologist, so I can't prescribe medicine. Sorry, guys, but one of the things
that's got to be one of your lines. Love it.
Yeah. So one of the things that people would always come to me and say is like, well, what can you give me? What can you give me for this? And I'm like, hard conversations and dedication. Like, I mean, there's nothing I can give you for this. And I have a specific memory of of a client coming to me with bad anxiety. And I said, okay, like, let's get a little bit of a personal health history. Let's talk about, how you spend your days. And he's like, usually have a donut and a couple of, a donut and a liter of Mountain Dew for breakfast. I'm not kidding. I'm from Alabama, so these sorts of things are to be expected. But and I'm like, look, hey man, like, drinking that much caffeine and sugar is gonna like make anyone anxious. So can we talk about that? Like, no, like, I want medicine, or like, what are the magic words that you're going to say to me to not make me anxious? And I'm like, at some point you got to stop drinking so much Mountain Dew. And I think that's what we run into with advisors too, right? Is we want the silver bullet. And I think there's two parts to how you begin this behavioral journey. The first one is sort of a leap of faith, right? Like you have to believe in it enough to try it. And then you have to feel something. And I know that's kind of mushy, but when you have an interaction with a client that is so deep and so next level and so connected, it feels qualitatively different. And I think once you've had a taste of that, there's no going back to the color by number sales book that you learned, when you were 22, cutting your teeth in the business. So I think you gotta listen to podcasts like this, know enough about the research to say, yeah, that makes sense, and take that leap of faith. And I think once you feel that difference, you'll be converted. That's what I'm banking on.
I love that. There's a million clips in the last 5 minutes that we can use for content here, by the way.
But it's true. I mean, to quantify that feeling is difficult, but to say it doesn't exist would be a lie. I love that. The fight for it. And I cannot agree with you more in terms of, I feel like at some point there is that at least a little bit leap of faith. You have to believe in the thing you can't see enough to run towards it, at least to something, or you're just pushing a rock uphill.
Yeah. Let's get to Nick's question here.
This is a good question from Nick. Any life expectancy data on financial advisors? I have known too many people who died before 60 in the industry.
Wow, Nick, great question. So there's parts of this question that I know, and there's parts that I don't know. So one of the things that I don't know the life expectancy for our financial advisors. I know when I was in grad school that financial professionals were second in their level of suicidality, only to dentists. So dentists were the only people who were more prone to suicide than financial professionals. I also know that in 2008, 2009, Brad Klontz and a couple of his colleagues, who I'm spacing their names, sorry colleagues, but they did a survey of financial professionals, and they looked at the incidence of PTSD, anxiety, and depression among financial professionals. 93%. 93% of financial professionals showed clinical levels of anxiety, depression, or PTSD coming out of the great financial crisis. So, I talked early in this conversation about how I left the world of psychotherapy because I was taking my work home with me. Well, financial advisors are, in a very real sense, therapists, right? I mean, they experience secondary PTSD-like stuff because they are this barrier between a client and a bad decision. And in a very real sense, their job is to absorb the angst and frustration and fear of 100 clients, every time we have a March of 2020, and it's out of their hands. That's the thing that makes it so tricky. One of the things that's most damaging for your mental health is uncertainty and lack of control. And so here's an advisor who's doing everything right? Like planning, helping clients, educating clients. And then COVID comes along and wham, like you did nothing wrong. Suddenly your business is down a third. Every one of your clients is upset, and it's no fault of your own. And so I don't know the life expectancy data on financial advisors, but I do know that there's data to suggest that many financial advisors should be seeking professional help, that I think that they should be working with a therapist to sort of help offload some of this, because if you're doing it right, it's candidly can be quite heavy. Like it can be quite stressful, I think, if you're doing it right. So
what a great conversation. That's like, because you're so right. Like everything's fine of February of last year, and then you just happen to have one or two clients that are literally about to turn the spigot on in retirement, and then this whole thing happens, and just horrible timing, and you're shouldering all that weight.
Yep.
You've been 6 months in cash, and maybe you could have used 12. Like again, you really think you're doing the right things, but you could you have prepared for that situation? What's something, and maybe this is dropping too much on you. I love this in terms of what Jeff just mentioned. Meditation and stoicism has helped me. What would you add in besides, or I guess therapy was your answer? Anything outside of that advisors should be doing to keep control of this and to keep it in the back of their mind and make sure? I'd imagine, and you'd have to tell me with your expertise, that a person, let's call it deteriorating mentally or like starting to lose angst, probably happens over time. It builds on like mud and probably feels heavier and heavier. What do you think an advisor can do to grab a hold of that situation and know that they're going down that path?
Yeah. So first of all, I think you need to recognize the warning signs, right? So a lot of time the warning signs are not what you think they are, especially among men, right? Who, let's face it, make up the bulk of our profession, right? I think men have been so socialized to run from their feelings and things that a lot of times it's going to look like, loss of appetite, weight gain, weight loss, gain or loss of appetite, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, lethargy, anhedonia, which is like losing interest in things that you used to find pleasurable. So all of these things I think are early warning signs. I think therapy is like a great, sort of one-stop shop. The thing that I would tell you, much like working with a financial advisor, working with a therapist has everything to do with goodness of fit. So see if you will get a therapist who will let you have a 5-minute conversation with them, like a 5-minute Zoom call to just say, hey, do we hit it off? Because the best predictor of therapeutic outcomes is rapport, right? The best predictor is not how many years of school they went to. It's not, how many degrees they have on their wall. It's, do you like them? Like, right. Do you connect? So see if that rapport is there. The final thing I would say, I would preach this model till I was blue in the face, sometimes 20 times a week last year, because I think it's so important. Martin Seligman from Corey's neighborhood, from the University of Pennsylvania, has this model called PERMA, and it's kind of the five facets of wellness. So the P in PERMA is for positive experiences. This is fun, right? Like this is eat an ice cream cone, go for a walk, go to Disney World, like whatever that looks like for you, right? So are you getting enough fun in your life? The E is for engagement. Engagement is deep work that causes you to lose track of time. That might be your job. It might be guitar, right? It might be a hobby. It might be something else. But are you doing things that are engaging? The R is for relationships. How are your relationships doing? That's the number one predictor of how your mental health is going to be. The M is for meaning. This is prayer, meditation, spirituality, religion, charitable giving, philanthropy. It's getting outside of yourself and working for something bigger. And then the A is for advancement, like tracking your progress, seeing that you're getting better today than you were yesterday. So check out that PERMA model. Look for those early warning signs. Don't be scared to go ask for 5 minutes of a therapist's time to see if they're a good fit.
Daniel, I want to be respectful of your time, and there's a ton of questions that I also want to pull up here real quick if we can, but I love where this conversation has gone over the last 15 minutes, because the point you made is the industry, it's not just male or female. The industry as a whole does not, in my experience, over 15 years of being here, 16 years, does not really like talking about this stuff. It's not very comfortable for the majority of people in finance, in the Wall Street world, to talk about their feelings and all these things. So
I love going to tell you when you're onboarding, hey, by the way,
yeah.
93% of people hate their lives. Let's go ahead and get started,
For sure. So I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Here's some of the questions I just want to
let's jump into questions, because obviously, Daniel, we could bring you on for 5-6 podcasts to dig into each one of these. Could be individual episodes, just with how much
you could come work for
experience and
MCO
knowledge
Advisors.
you have.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
All right, let's do this. We have a 10:30. We have 6 minutes. Can you handle a speed round of questions?
Let's go. I mean, this one will be easy because I know nothing about it. So no, James, I've not looked into it. I mean, I can see why it would feel like rejection. I can see why there would be an emotional toll. It's not, I'm afraid it's nothing I've studied very closely. So I'm sorry about that.
Cool. What else do you have? Did you have another question?
I'm just looking at a bunch of these comments coming in. Isn't everything about rapport? That's kind of a rhetorical comment, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
What's something, I guess, like I said, when you're implementing, I love what you said about the planning process. I think the value you added there was something impactful in the beginning and the end. When you're explaining finance to people and how the market works, what would you say the type of language an advisor should use to prepare for somebody of these COVID situations? Obviously, we can say we don't know what's happening, but how do you set up expectations during the planning process so that maybe these marches don't feel so painful?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to do. Like, one of the things we need to do is set expectations, right? So set expectations. So there was a recent survey that polled investors and said, what do you think the returns in the US market are going to look like for the next 10 years? And the average response was 15% annualized for the next 10 years. Okay. Like, heaven help us if that's true. Like, I mean, like, look, nobody knows anything. Maybe it will be. I seriously doubt it. Like, given the levels that we're at right now. And so I think that one of the things we need to do is educate our clients about what to expect. Like, you can expect 10% a year on average, but it's extremely lumpy, right? Like, no year is going to be 10%, or very seldom will it be 10%. It's going to be -25, +50, +3, -7. It's going to be all over the place. So I think you have to educate them. You have to educate them to expect a correction every single year. Like, every single year, the average drawdown for the past 35 years is 14% intra-year drawdown. So just say, look, every year that I have your money, you're going to be upset. Like, there's going to be a time where you think the sky is falling. There's going to be a narrative that makes total sense to you, and you're going to be freaked out. And then every 5 or 6 years, we're going to get a true kick in the stomach. Right? So I think you have to set expectations, but then even once we've set expectations, we have to understand that telling someone about a 10% drop or a 25% drop and seeing a 25% drop where that client just hit $1 million in February of 2020 and now it's 750 and they're like, like, I didn't make, my first job paid me 50 grand and I just lost 5 years income in one fell swoop. So we have to educate them about sort of rationally what to expect, but then we have to also educate them that no amount of education will salve that wound and that's what we're here for. Right? There's going to be times when no matter how many seminars you come to and I preach these things to you, it's not going to matter. You're going to freak out. And that's what I'm here for, to keep you from making the bad decision. And the last thing that I will say is we need to do a better job of taking victory laps, right? If you had a client who wanted to, your client with $1 million, right? Your client with $1 million calls you in March of 2020, they want to get out of the market because now their $1 million is 700,000, and you keep them in, and now their $1 million is whatever it is, 1.25 or whatever. The delta, that $500,000 delta, they will never repay you. They will never repay you on the back of that one piece of advice. And I think we need to get better about saying, hey, remember the last time this happened? Remember in 08, 09 when you wanted to sell out in March of 09 and I wouldn't let you and I made you X? Like, you're not going to do it here either. And we're going to wait and see where it shakes out. We need to do a better job of quantifying dollars and cents, the value of our advice, because behavioral coaching is invaluable. And I don't think we take enough victory laps.
That's huge. I love that.
Yeah. So many awesome clips we'll have to pull out of this and somehow get it to you, Daniel, for either you to use or for us to share something.
Mason's in quick form.
Last question I'll hit you with. And Jeffrey said rebook him. Completely agree. I think I'd love to have you back on the show sometime in the future just to keep digging in. But how do you balance the need for equity exposure with a young client who has a low risk composure according to your questionnaire?
So it's a great question. So the answer is that risk composure doesn't factor into the asset allocation almost at all. So it's really just a tool for the advisor. The asset allocation is going to be driven 90% by their tolerance and their capacity for risk. The low risk composure, Mason, is just a shout out to you as the advisor to say, hey, look out for Corey because he's a train wreck. No, but look out for this client. It's gonna help you know better how to coach them, know that they're the kind of client who needs this help, because if we gave low equity exposure to every nervous Nelly in the stock market, no one would ever reach their goals. So tolerance and capacity drive the asset allocation. You, the advisor, drive the management of the behavior relative to the risk composure.
Man,
some of his comments are really funny.
I feel like you toe that line, and I love where this conversation goes because you're so empathetic. You're thinking about people's minds, but you're also like crossing that line between, no, this is how you have to be persuasive. This is how you sell to people with the empathy. This is how we make sure we're taking people along, understanding the ride, but getting them their results. So I love that you put the ball in their court and in your own with the responsibility of where people should go and how people should feel.
Yeah, Nick, thank you for the books. I get $3 every time someone buys a book. So I'm about to hit that $5 footlong for lunch.
Maybe a third guitar in the back after 7 years.
Toss a Mountain Dew in there.
Look, I got a third guitar. That my best guitar is over here, kind of on the floor, because I've been playing it. But yeah, there's more guitars to come though. If Nick will keep buying books.
Guys, if you enjoyed this, which I know you did, I tagged Daniel already in the episode. Go check out his content. At least 2 TEDx talks, I believe, that I saw.
Three, only 2 good ones.
Oh, okay. So just like his books, only 2 good talks, 2 good books.
I tap out it too.
If you consume all of his content, guaranteed to enjoy 4 things.
Yeah, right.
So again, follow Daniel. I don't know what's your preferred place of contact if people want to reach out to you?
Yeah, three places. Go check out my podcast called Standard Deviations. Corey talked about my latest episode, which I thought was very good, if I did say so. LinkedIn, Daniel Crosby, Ph.D. Twitter for dad jokes at Daniel Crosby.
Awesome. And a great, love the podcast that you're doing. And as I mentioned in the post here, you had on Stacey Havener recently talking about storytelling, which was how I found you. Sure. So love your podcast. I'm addicted to it now. I suggest everybody else jump in there. It's again, we're talking about how do you get your mind right for marketing. We try to put out this show attached like this podcast to try to educate people. I think that's exactly what you're doing in a world where we need and desire more education. So I can't thank you enough for being here. And while I have to jump off the show quickly, I appreciate you so much and would love to have you back on.
Not happy to do it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Daniel.
See you, Daniel. Have an awesome day.
What a show.
What a show. As I felt it would be, and get excited of these guests where I'm like, I have an inkling to bring them on, but then when they come on, just knock it out of the park. And sometimes
they have
it's
so much. There's so much content.
I know these guys are always educated and know what they're talking about, but I never know how awesome it's going to be and how they present it. Great storyteller, same as Stacey, another great guest. Appreciate you guys for being here. We can't leave paid members hanging because that wouldn't make sense to do the free show while they're paying us. So we have to go. But thank you guys for being here. Rewatch this episode 10 times if you want to up your financial planning game. Really. Daniel's a great guy.
MCOadvisors.com.
Join us, buy his books,
coaching.
buy our stuff. Everybody go spend money somewhere, and have a good Friday and a good weekend.
Cheers.
All right, let's get this up. Where is my Zoom? All right. All right. I don't know why it's not letting me sign. I think with both of us signing in, it goes to
Yeah, it takes me to the wrong place.
Yeah, so I go to the
Why do people continuously fool me on LinkedIn? Like they ask me to be a connection, I let it sit there for a week, I finally accept, and then I get sold to. It drives me crazy.
Where the hell are these meetings? Why are they not showing up? Am I not signed in?
All right, let me set up here, and I will join you over there. Goodbye.
All right. My God, that was ridiculous, everybody.